Hey ladies, welcome to another episode of the Revitalized Womanhood podcast. And today I am joined by the lovely Emma Mumford from across the pond, right? Is that how we say it? That's how we say it. And Emma, I am so excited to talk to you today. I have been binging your podcast and diving really deep into things. And I think you especially are going to appreciate some of the very, very random coincidences that have popped up in my deep dive of you, and it's almost kind of freaky weird. So I'm excited to tell you about that. But ladies, this is Emma. She is a 3-time best-selling author. She is UK's #1 spirituality podcast host, and she's the manifestation, alignment, and spirituality queen, right? So
thank you.
That you have such an amazing list of accolades. But would you please introduce yourself to my listeners?
Of course. Well, my name is Emma and I am an award-winning life coach and best-selling author, as you said. I have a YouTube channel as well that I've run over the last decade. I have my podcast, Spiritual Queen's Badass Podcast. And basically, I love to teach the law of attraction, manifestation, and spirituality. It is my absolute passion. And I just love helping people to make the law of attraction accessible and tangible for them so that they can manifest their dream life.
That's beautiful. What made you decide, what was there something that happened to you that put you on this path, or was it just a gradual change into figuring out that this was a passion?
Yeah, it was completely random. It was not planned in any way, shape or form. So I always take everyone back to 2012. So, 12 years ago now, gosh. Right. And I was in a very different place in my life. I just come out of college. I knew I didn't want to go to university. So for me, it was very much a kind of crossroads at that point of, well, I'm just going to have to go get a job. So I fell into a whole heap of random jobs. Again, I knew that I wanted a business, but at the time, YouTube was so early. There was no such thing as influencers, content creators, nothing. So, I always remember this one example of being in my business studies class and saying, the assignment was to create some project or something on the business that you would run. And the business that I had created was about, not necessarily just about me, but was me as the face of it. And, my business teacher at the time was like, Emma, you failed the assignment. You have to create a product. You have to invent something. You can't run a business and be the face of it. That's ridiculous. So it was even then my intuition knew, but I just didn't have evidence or, that just wasn't a thing at all back in that day. So I actually ended up getting into banking, which is really random, not what I planned, and definitely not an aspiration of mine in any way, shape or form. I felt very underqualified for that role, but as with a lot of things in my life, I turned up, took the opportunity, and, I was doing really well in that position. But at the same time in my personal life, I was in my first really not great relationship, and he had £30,000 worth of debt that I knew nothing about. And we started having bailiffs turn up at the door, demanding this money, which was really, really scary at that time. I was 18, 19 years old, so young. And to have that as your reality was horrible. So that was a real big awakening and sort of loud wake up call for me. And obviously, as he was my boyfriend at the time, I had preferential rates at the bank. So I said, well, I'll take out a loan to cover as what I thought at the time was £7,000 worth of debt. Soon turned out to be 30. I took that on and I was like, you pay it off and then at least we get the bailiffs off our back. And you can probably guess what happened next.
Wow.
After I took out that loan, the relationship very quickly broke down and he never ended up paying a single penny of that loan to this day. So I was going to the bank every day, feeling so anxious, and I'd had a history of anxiety and depression anyway, but it was really coming full frontal at that point. Putting people in debt every day as part of my job, then being in debt myself, having that loan and knowing that it was my financial responsibility to pay that off was horrid. So I kept having panic attack after panic attack at work. And realized I can't do this. This is not for me. I love helping people. I love talking to people, but I can't I can't be in this toxic, negative environment of being targeted, of putting people in debt. And, you know, you can look at it from the positive of helping people by, you know, giving them, you know, loans, mortgages, credit cards, whatever. But then there was also the dark side of it as well, which really, I think, had the most impact on me, where people couldn't get access to credit and desperately needed it to feed their children or whatever the emergency situation was. And I had to be that person that said, I can't give you anything. So it was soul destroying, that job. And I left and I went and just got a part-time retail job just to take the pressure off myself, to really focus on my mental health and start to pay off this debt. And that's when I came across extreme couponing, the most random thing ever. And it was almost like a savior for me in some ways, because it then gave me that hope and that positivity of, okay, I can coupon my way out of this debt. And here in the UK, back in 2012, it was not spoken about. There was nobody talking about it at all. It was very taboo, just like a lot of things here in the UK. And I thought, well, if the Americans can do it and do it so incredibly well, like surely I could do this here. And that would really help me in this situation. So fast forward a few months, I'd been doing it just for myself, and literally my spare room looked exactly like it does on the show, like, you know, stockpiles, everything. And my friends were like, Emma, you need to share this with people. Like, people would love this. Like, you could help them get out of debt too. But of course I was like, well, who am I to do that? I'm just Emma. Like, you know, we had Martin Lewis at the time, who's a big financial expert here in the UK. Like, who am I to do that? So after a lot of pestering, he encouraged me to start a Facebook page. And really that page just blew up so quickly, and within 6 months it had like 100,000 followers. I was being invited on like national TV to do like couponing and money saving tips and advice. The press had nicknamed me the coupon queen, and it just got a bit wild because, you know, there was on one hand going from working in the bank, getting into debt, coming out of debt, having this page, you know, going on TV and doing really cool things, but equally that, you know, that inner work, that anxiety, that depression was still there, even though these really happy things were happening to me. So for the first year of that couponing page, I didn't earn a single penny. And then I eventually learned how to turn it into a business. Again, totally unexpected, no plan whatsoever to fall into couponing or fall into money saving. But you'll see the theme of money seems to follow me a lot in this lifetime. And I ran that business for 6 happy years, and it was honestly the most incredible thing to do. And it was so amazing to be able to help people positively work with money and get out of debt instead of putting them into debt. And then in 2016 is the next part to the story, where I was in my second not so great relationship at that point. And the anxiety and depression had again continued throughout that whole period, and it was getting worse and getting heavier and getting denser. And really at that point in 2016 was probably the lowest point for me, because I was just so emotionally drained. Even though I had this incredible business on the outside, I had a 6-figure business, I was doing all these cool, amazing things, but the anxiety and depression was very much still there. So it was a very confusing time, because I think a lot of people would have looked at my life and been like, well, look at all these amazing things you have, Emma. And, you know, the inside, the reality of it was very, very different, especially in that relationship as well. So that relationship broke down, and that really was the catalyst for what I call my spiritual awakening. And I was really at breaking point where I was like, well, I'm either going to take my life or change my life. And I knew that I didn't want to take my life, and I knew that that wasn't what I wanted to do in my core, in my soul, but I didn't know how to love myself. I didn't know how to be positive. I didn't know how to get out of this mess. And that's actually when the law of attraction found me, and I kept finding this word, law of attraction, and I had no idea what it meant, no clue. And I definitely wasn't spiritual or religious before. I would have said I was probably an atheist, if anything. So I had no idea of what I was about to get into. But it really did save my life, just like couponing. And I then, just like couponing, fell in love with the concept of manifesting and law of attraction, and read all the books and watched all the videos. And I was like, this is what I need. And even I remember like a month into finding it and, you know, reading the books and doing all the tools and things, I felt a huge weight and huge shift in me, you know, with my anxiety and things. And I just realized, you know, like, this is what I've been searching for all this time. And this is what's going to help me get out of the place that I was. So about a year of loving the law of attraction, sharing it on my YouTube channel. Obviously, my work was still primarily money saving and couponing, but people loved that I was talking about law of attraction too. I realized that my business had massively outgrown me. It needed a whole team of people because it got so big. And I realized that I'd outgrown it a bit as well. Not that I don't love money saving and I'm always going to love couponing. That is always a part of me. But really, I thought, well, actually, I really want to help people in a different way. I want to help people manifest money. I want to help people have positive relationships with money. I want them to see the transformation that I've gone through in my life as well. So yeah, that was my turning point of wanting to step into my spiritual shoes and obviously creating the business that you see today. So I sold my couponing business in 2018 and the rest is history.
That's very cool. And 3 books later, geez, 3 books later, it's amazing. I'm sorry, we were messing with my sound earlier and now I just messed with it again. Oh, heaven's sake. And my listeners know, they're like, oh, Gina. I'm like, it's mom life. It's mom life over here. Well, like I said, I was just diving into this and I'm not going to lie. I'm going to be honest with you. I come from a very conservative in terms of spirituality and astrology and that kind of thing. It's very conservative here in Utah, especially. But I think in America, I know that these things are starting to pick up and gain traction. And I love that because anything, it's all about being open-minded and then and being educated, right? It's like, yeah, if something's not for you, great, but don't just close the door on it because you're uneducated about it. Like, explore it. Why not? And it's like you said, when you came into it, you had no idea. You were, just new to it, and it was just speaking to you so loudly in your soul, right? So that's kind of where I'm coming to you as well, is since I started this company, this women's community and this women's movement here in the US, I have had these kinds of things dabbled in. So I'm kind of slowly sending these kinds of new ideas out to women that are like myself and more conservative in thinking this way, and like manifesting and affirmations, and which are all so, and laws of attraction, which is all proven through science before it even was proven through spirituality, I think. I think from what I've learned so far. Again, new to all of this, but you are the expert. But anyway, so as I was deep diving, so the first thing, first of all, I am super bummed that I missed your last masterclass. So I need to get on whatever waiting list or email list. So I'm going to go in there and do that because you were talking about it. And I was over the moon when you talked about 2024 being in numerology, the year of abundance, right? The year of abundance, because it feels that way. Before I even read that, I absolutely feel that way. And it feels that way in my algorithm. It feels that way in the women that I'm drawn to. It feels that way in, like, everybody's just done with being told how to live, what to choose, what's right for them, being told what's right for them instead of choosing what's right for them. I think you're right. And that has been kind of a theme of my last few podcast episodes, is we're kind of all done. There's like, we're ready for a reckoning, and 2024 is like the year of us, right? It's like taking back that power. So when you said that, I was like, oh, yes. And then your word of the year is joy. That was my first signal that I'm like, yeah, this girl, she and we got something going on, because we just got a new puppy December for Christmas and we named her Joy. Oh. So that is our first connection. Anyway, but my word of the year is results. So with that, as far as abundance goes for my community, I do want it to be money. I do want it to be relationships. I do want those same things. But right now, I'm just being told somehow intuitively to talk about regaining our power, the power over ourselves, the power of saying no to things, the power of creating schedules in a way that give us joy and give us peace. And so abundance for me, even though my word is results, that is like the overarching of abundance, because the results of this are going to get you that abundance, are going to get you that peace. So I am super excited but before we start in on the power, the getting back our personal power, I want to talk to you about. Can we start with the process of the past? The process of the past being able to get over the things that are keeping us held and not allowing us to find that abundance, not allowing us to cut ties, not allowing us to break free of the things so that we can create space for the things that are going to serve us, right? I want to talk about that. And I want to talk a little bit about the living grief, because that was loud and clear for me. I've got quite a few members right now that this is absolutely will just speak volumes to. And so can we jump into that a little bit first?
Yeah, of course. And I think, you know, as I write in Hurt, Healing, Healed, which is the book that talks about living grief as like the inner work Bible, if there ever was one. You know, when I wrote Positively Wealthy, my first book, you know, obviously I talk about, you know, limiting beliefs and fears in there. But I don't think I truly understood how deep that work can go until I walked the journey of Hurt, Healing, Healed, which was 2020 to 2022 when, you know, I finished wrapping up that book. And I had obviously known about manifesting since 2016. I'd obviously had amazing results. I'd obviously seen so much incredible abundance in my life. But what really, you know, brought that to the forefront was lockdown, was COVID. And I think that was the same for so many of us. Like as soon as 2020 hit, boom, inner child work came up for me. Then it was like one domino effect after the other of uncovering why I'd had anxiety and depression for all those years, you know, over a decade of my life. You know, where all that stemmed from, why I went for really not great relationships time and time again. And it was again at the end of and my third not great relationship that I was like, what is going on here? Like, I cannot keep doing this. You know, I know about the law of attraction now. I have a level of self-love, you know, what the heck is going on here? But each one of those relationships showed me what I had to work on within myself. So my relationships personally have been the biggest catalyst for the inner work. But for other people, it may be something completely different. So I can only speak from that experience. Right. But, you know, it's so important because I was having results, but I wasn't seeing aligned abundance. I was seeing half-assed abundance, if I could call it anything. And that's not to say I didn't love the things I was manifesting. You know, I'd manifested so many amazing things off my vision board. But as I grew and evolved, I realized that I didn't quite align with those goals and visions as much. And that is a natural evolution we all go through. But then I really looked at the relationships, for example, which was a huge manifestation that I wanted to manifest, was finding someone to, you know, get married to and have a family with. And I just didn't seem to be hitting that manifestation at all. You know, I'd get close and then I'd be like, oh, here we go. There's that pattern. There's that cycle. There's that repeating thing again. So for me, that was really my wake up call of, what am I doing wrong here? And Positively Wealthy was that catalyst of I'd manifested everything off my vision board and felt miserable. And I was like, what? Like, how is this the law of attraction? Like, nobody else seems to be going around manifesting all these incredible things. And I felt like a fraud. I felt like, what have I done wrong here to have all this success, have all this, you know, all kinds of abundance in my life, but feel miserable on the inside? And it's because in, you know, a lot of the old school teachings around law of attraction, they don't talk about inner work. They don't talk, you know, they might talk about belief. They might talk about, you know, believing it's possible. But there is absolutely no mention in all of the books that I read when I first spiritually awakened, all the greats, all the classics, of inner work, limiting beliefs or fears, how our minds work as humans, and why we get blocks, why we struggle to manifest those things we really, really want, why I was attracting time and time again those relationships that I didn't want, but my energy was saying, well, Emma, you've got to learn the lesson. You've got to heal that part of you to manifest the relationship that you want. So I want to counteract that, because there is a not so great teaching in the law of attraction sphere of saying that you manifest everything to you, which yes, in some parts is true, but it's also not true in other parts too, because then you get into the realm of saying, well, you know, Emma, you just manifested those emotionally abusive relationships to you every single time, which is so disempowering for me to sit there and think, oh, I'm manifesting pain to me. I'm manifesting abuse to me. I'm manifesting that, like, again, if you looked at any situation of a child with a terminal illness, you can't say a child has manifested that to themselves. So I feel like so many people pigeonhole the law of attraction around it being the be all and end all and you manifesting to you, even if it's bad, and it's simply not true. What you manifest is your consistent vibration. And that doesn't, you know, for me in terms of relationships, yes, I had a consistent vibration because of my earlier childhood experiences. But those, you know, challenges I went through only allowed me to up level and heal to have the happiness and genuine happiness and joy that I have today. So I think when we get into that realm of, you know, saying that people have manifested bad things to them, it disempowers people. It doesn't help them in any way, shape or form. And then you live in fear because you're like, oh, I can't possibly think a negative thought. I can't possibly fear that. And honestly, the amount of DMs I get from people fearful of, Emma, I'm really worried this is going to happen and now I'm manifesting it. And it's like, no, you're not going to manifest everything that you think of. We're humans. We have over 80,000 thoughts a day. Not all 80,000 of our thoughts manifest. We do not live in a world of instantaneous manifestation, thank God. You know, like it would be chaos if we did. So what does manifest is your consistent vibration and energy, not your thoughts. And I do believe energy trumps thoughts. You know, it really is so much deeper than that. And the law of attraction is also one of 7 energetic laws of the universe. It's 1 out of 7. So actually the law of polarity, which I talk about heavily in Hurt, Healing, Healed, is the definition of the inner work, the past, the yin, the yang, the darkness, the light, the summer, the winter, the masculine, the feminine energy. It's the opposite. So the law of polarity really broken down is that, you know, how would we know what a happy day is if we've never experienced a sad day? How would we know what joy feels like if we'd never experienced sadness? So the law of polarity is all around us. And I think when we can, you know, look at the bigger picture and realize that the universe is not just as black and white as you manifested it, you start then to take back your power, and you're able to look at things more, I don't want to say practically because you know, it's a mind, body, spirit experience, but you know, you start to look at things in a different light of what is this giving me the opportunity to do? How have I got here and how can I make a change? So I really want to put that in here because I know a lot of people have that fear of manifesting, and you know, it takes so much joy away from you because you're living in fear, which is just going to attract fearful things to you. So, you know, you don't want to be in that energy and vibration at all. It's okay to have thoughts. It's okay to have down days. You have to honor your feelings. And that is the process of the inner work and healing. Because again, very early on in my early days of learning about the law of attraction, I used to have all these obsessive thoughts and, you know, like negative thoughts. And I was like, oh my God, no, I can't think bad thoughts, can't think bad thoughts. I must reframe it into a positive. And the energy and the time that I was giving to that, to fight, to battle these thoughts. And they only ever gained momentum and power because I was giving them that by fearing them and being like, oh my God, don't think bad thoughts.
You're creating this fear cycle, this anxiety. You can hear it when you're talking about it. You can absolutely hear the anxiety and the fear cycle that you're creating from, don't think like that. But now I'm thinking like that. There's got to be, it's, and we're going to get into intentional manifesting for sure, because that's what you're saying is that where you're going to put your focus is where the manifestation comes into being helpful, comes into being practical, comes into being useful in these ways. But where in this is, how do you start with processing through the things that have happened in your past? Because you're saying you've gone through these 3 relationships, which I 100% agree that in each one, you became stronger. You learned different things. You learned different things about yourself. The 18-year-old you could not have processed the same things that 28-year-old you could process. She couldn't. Her brain wasn't expanded enough. You know what I mean? So we grow, hopefully, the way we're supposed to. And so, but what's the first step? You know, if you have someone that is, here I am, 41 years old, right? I've never done any kind of inner child work. I've never done any, I'm just going to use me as an example because that's the easiest way. But you say you're having this happen to you because of something that's happened in your past. And I'm like, what? well, how do I figure that out? How do I start digging that out? How do I root this out other than just buying your amazing book and working through it step by step? But you know what I mean?
So not everybody is going to have inner work to work through. And I think that's the important thing to say here.
That's a very cool thing to clarify.
Yeah, because I think it's such a buzzword and topic at the moment of inner work,
Yes.
trauma, limiting beliefs, fears, that everyone's like, oh my God, I'm going to have all this stuff. And, especially when someone hears my story, for example, I think a lot of people are like, oh my God. And like, honestly, it's not going to be the same for everybody. Like mine's just, my experience and my journey personally. But essentially a great way to determine whether there is anything to work on is, you'll tell with your manifestations very easily. That's always a good kind of entry point, because if you're, wanting to manifest money, for example, and then as soon as you set that intention, or you look at the check you've written or your vision board and you feel fear or anxious, or you feel a kind of constricting feeling, then that's obviously a very good place to start. Whereas if you look at your desire and it feels expansive and joyful and light and positive, there's probably not a lot of resistance there, if any. So looking at your desires and looking at what feels the most frustrating, is there one that really isn't manifesting and isn't showing up, and you're, banging your head against the wall in frustration of like, what am I doing? I'm doing everything. Why is it not showing up? There definitely could be some resistance there, but it could also be other things along the manifestation journey. But you'll know by what I'm about to say whether it's the mindset or whether it's something else. Another good way to determine away from your manifestations whether there is anything under the surface, and again, I have been shocked over my years in my own journey how certain beliefs and patterns have related to money mindset, for example, but have been something in like worth or something completely different in a different area of what I would see like totally different beliefs. But actually that belief around self-worth does impact my finances and does impact money. So it may not always be obvious. That's the key here. But essentially, if you're someone who gets triggered quite easily, you might be having a conversation and something your partner does, or your friend does, or your brother does is just really infuriating you and it really winds you up every time they do it. That could definitely be an indicator that there is something there. If you were someone who is like, I just don't know why I have this like irrational anger or this irrational frustration when someone does or says that certain thing, then that definitely could indicate that there is some work there. If you're someone who feels anxiety, for example, or, feels that there may be things are coming up, maybe they don't have the vocabulary to articulate the emotions or the uncomfortable feelings that are coming up. So your body will let you know, definitely, as the famous book goes, the body keeps the score. Your body will let you know if there's something there. But I find that focusing it on your manifestations and seeing what resistance comes up there is probably the easiest part for everyone, because then, that's what you're working towards. So you're going to want to, release those blocks.
I know exactly what you're talking about. I know that I actually wrote this down when we get into your personal power with like relationships, scheduling, careers, work, whatever. It's listening to your gut and feeling the things that give you peace. Like say you have something scheduled with someone and it's just giving you that like, how many times we all have those moments where someone asks us to do something and we're like, ugh, and you dread it, but you're like, sure. It's like, you just felt so much dread around this. Why did you accept to do it? Because we feel like we need to do it. We feel like as women, we're obligated to be pleasing and be, all the things. And we're trying to break these cycles of what we've been taught. But it's because we've stopped listening to our intuition. We've had to become so in our masculine, I feel like. And obviously I'm speaking in generalities, ladies. I speak from my own personal because that's what I know. But we have all had to kind of conform to more of our masculine in this world, that I think we've shut down completely almost our intuitive feminine side that's saying you don't have time for that. You don't have space for that. No, that's not really what fits with your values and all those things. So when you come upon one of those things, like if you're putting a check on your vision board, on your vision board, and you feel that, like, why do I feel like I don't deserve that number? Or why don't I feel like that's attainable for me? And you look back into, I'm sorry if this is like a how-to course, but seriously, like what is the first step when you're like, oh, okay, I've identified the trigger. I've identified a situation that keeps bringing me this angst. So now what do I need to do to sit down and go into myself? Because the moments that I personally have had on my own journey have been so random. Like the last one that I can really think of, I was on a treadmill on that 17-day cruise I told you from Europe. And I was on the treadmill and I'm listening to a book, and it was actually the love languages. And he was talking about my love language, and I just started sobbing, like randomly in this gym room at 6 a.m. And I'm like, and everybody's like, wow, what is happening, right? And because something triggered for me that broke down what it is, why this is a love language and why it hurts me so much when it's not spoken to me. And it was from a childhood, thing. And so it came up by itself. It came up because I wasn't blocking it I mean, I don't think we're ever blocking anything intentionally, but now I'm allowing for these kind of thoughts to come in, like allowing for, why is that my love language? And then that coming in and being like, oh, so you know what I mean? So in my journey, they've kind of just randomly popped up, which has been very nice, not nice, but nice. But for someone else, when they feel that angst, or in your journey, when you felt that angst, what was your next step?
And I think what you've touched upon there is brilliant, because it will always come up when it's ready to. Our minds are incredibly intelligent things, and especially our subconscious mind, where those limiting beliefs, fears and traumas, sit in. And I don't want to use the word trauma in a way that triggers anybody, because actually when you look at the psychology term of trauma, it literally could be, back in school, a child said something to you about the way you looked and you took that on, and that is a form of trauma. So every single person on this planet has limiting beliefs and fears. To what degree will vastly, differ in terms of whether you have something that gives you anxiety and depression, or whether you have something that just, pops up every now and again and you think, oh, I wish I could feel a bit better about myself when I look in the mirror. So everybody's journey and everybody's backpack that they're carrying in life will be different, absolutely, in size, in weight, in how many years. So again, it's so hard to say, well, this is what it's going to look like for everybody, because everybody's healing journey is so unique and different. But essentially, like you said, if something comes up, that's a great time to work on it. I think in the self-help and spiritual sphere, people love doing the inner work, and sometimes you don't need to. As you touched upon there with the masculine and feminine energy, the masculine energy represents summer. It represents the outer manifestation energy, whereas the feminine energy represents the more inwards, winter, healing side of things. So sometimes we are going to, again, law of polarity here, go into our feminine, and something might come up and we might need to slow down and give some time and rest and look at that emotional fear that's coming up. And sometimes we're going to be in our outer masculine and feel joyful and everything's great and everything's flowing, and you don't need to do the inner work if nothing's coming up. So you don't need to look for the inner work. It will come up if it's meant to, and if that is there for you. So I definitely wouldn't go around trying to find things, because if you know something's there, great, but you don't need to do the inner work if you don't need to do it at that point. So when someone picks up Hurt, Healing, Healed, they might read it cover to cover and think, I actually feel okay at the moment. But then 6 months later, something might come up, and that's when you need the book. That's when you need to tap into it. So in terms of things you can start with, if you know something's there, talking to it is the most easiest way to start. So when that thought comes up, whether it's you look in the mirror and you feel like, oh, I don't want to look in the mirror, I don't feel good today, whatever the stories and the statements are that come up, it's really important to know that our inner critic, our ego, is actually our inner child. So essentially, it's just that part of us, part of our psyche that wants to be acknowledged and loved. So I love talking to those fears, talking to those beliefs and saying, hey, what's up? Like, how are you feeling today? What's made you feel like that? And, just giving myself a hug and just being like, it's okay. I love you, you're safe, it's okay. And that is something so simple that you can do to just talk to yourself. Even if you're not talking to your inner child directly, maybe you haven't connected to that before, so that doesn't resonate with you yet. But essentially just talking to yourself and talking yourself into the belief of, where's this come from? And it's really good to unpack it. So for instance, say you've set a desire and it's to manifest £10,000 or whatever, And the fear that's come up is, oh, you're not worthy of that. Like, you can't do that. That's impossible. That's only for people on Instagram. You're not going to do that. Then I would say, what are you scared of? What's the fear here? Like, why do you feel that you're not worthy? And just talk to it, and you'll get answers. And those answers, you can journal it down as well, because it's important to write it down so you can keep a track of what's coming up and work on that. But again, you'll get some really great insights just from doing that simple practice. And then you'll find actually that you break it down. So for instance, the surface level comment could be around, you're not worthy of having that money. And then you might break it down and it's like, well, I actually just don't feel lovable. And then you talk to it again and say, well, actually you felt this way as a child because, your parents had money and maybe you felt like they didn't share that with you, or whatever the story is. It will be so many random things you probably haven't thought about in decades. But from the age of 0 to 7, our mind is like a sponge. And essentially our minds are saying yes to everything. So our limiting beliefs and fears are always, 99% of the time, not exclusively, but most of the time, created in our childhood, the root of it at least. We can absolutely, create limiting beliefs and fears throughout all of our life. But primarily the root of the big stuff will come from the ages of 0 to 7, if not a little bit older. So really from 0 to 7, we're saying yes to everything. So we're looking at our parents or our caregivers' relationship with money and saying, that's how money works. We're looking at our parents and caregivers and families' relationships and saying, that's how love works. So we are literally looking around the world and saying, this is how the world works. And then obviously we go into our school years and we learn how other things work in society. So by the age of 7, if not a little bit older, we have our core patterns and beliefs at that point. We have our core identities where we're saying, this is who I am and this is how the world works, and I'm going to go out into the world and project that. So I always find it interesting when you meet people and you have conversations with people, because you can actually imagine you're actually just talking to their childlike version of themselves. So if you know someone who just flies off the handle and you think, God, they sound like they're having a toddler tantrum, that's their inner child having that toddler tantrum. So I think when we can look at everybody with that compassion and say, whatever's going on for them, like they just need that love. Like we can flip the story of taking things so personally and be like, okay, how can I show up better? I witness what's happening here, but like, how's my inner child? What's going on for me? How is this making me feel as well?
Yeah, that's so good. And I identified so many of those when you were saying it. And actually I have by myself, like, good job, Gina, figured out it's a person in my life, their personality is something like that. And I said, it finally clicked to me that I'm watching my child. And maybe it's because my children got to an age where their behavior was the same as this person's. And so I was like, oh, that's like a 7-year-old. I'm watching the same thing my 7-year-old does. So yeah, it's true. And so not putting what's happening with them on you, but being able to identify those kind of things. It's so enlightening almost to it lifts a weight off, honestly, because when I finally made that connection, it lifted a weight off. It took it off of something that I felt like I was doing wrong. And I was like, oh, that's not me. It has nothing to do with me at all. So that was really cool. I love it. I love it. Wow. I have so many notes because I have so many things, and I feel like we're going to scratch the surface, but man, you might have to be back on here, girl. We may have to do this again. So I want to jump into, let me make sure I get it. No, that's okay. Actually, no, I do want to touch on this. I want to touch on living grief, because I do feel like there is so much power in treating situations in our lives that we kind of minimize, or other people minimize, or society minimizes, when they shouldn't be minimized. Because first of all, it doesn't matter if it's a big or small thing. Like, who decides it's big or small? It's happening to me. It's relative. It's like anything in the world. I may like this pair of pants, but you like that pair of pants. I mean, it's like anything, right? Everything's relative to personal taste. So when something happens to us, obviously with losing someone to death is grieving. That's a natural normal. Everybody knows that that's something you should be doing. But when you talk about in terms of friendships, relationships, marriages, miscarriages, and even like empty nesting, honestly, you think in terms of lives that could have been, should have been, or past. I was actually thinking about it today. You were stirring up some things, and I was in the bathroom cleaning up, and I looked at the tub, and there's little ducks all over, little rubber ducks all over the bathtub, and there's a Barbie in there, and there's a, you know, whatever. And I'm just looking at it, and I thought, an old version of me would have been just irritated by this mess. And the version of me that I'm trying to come into right now is like, I really appreciate this. Like, I wanted to take a picture of it and post it, because it's like, to someone else, this is a mess. To me, this is a 3-year-old that will only be 3 once, and maybe I'll never have these rubber duckies again. You know what I mean? And so you were talking about living grief, and I don't know if that's what triggered that thought, but I would like to talk to you a little bit about that, because I know of some women right now that are going through situations that they should be grieving the loss of a life that they were expecting, or lives that have happened and maybe won't happen ever again. And I'd love to talk to you about that.
Yeah, and it's so, so powerful, because I had no idea the feelings that I was feeling, especially after that last 3rd relationship, because, you know, I felt like I'd been like promised this life. I felt like I'd, you know, like we'd planned a whole life together, and then that was it. And I know to some people that would just be like, oh, Emma, get over it. It's a breakup. You'll meet someone else. It'll be fine. But I think when you've planned your life with someone in that intricacy, whether you're married, whether you're engaged, whether you have children or not, like, you know, the feelings are all still so real for everybody. And I was talking to my friend, and, you know, just in the trenches of inner work with it, and just feeling all this emotion and not knowing how to process it, why I was feeling all of this. And my friend Hannah said to me, Emma, you're experiencing living grief. And I was like, what? Like, nobody's died. Like, what are you on about? And she said, I had this when I was, you know, she's in a wheelchair now. So when she had her chronic health condition, she went from about 18 years old being this like able-bodied, happy party girl, loving life, dancing on top of the tables, as she says, to being bedridden within a week, and spending the next year of her life in bed, and now being in a wheelchair and having these chronic health conditions. And she said, you know, I had to grieve the version of myself that I thought, you know, the life that I had planned being an able-bodied person. I had to grieve all the things I thought I would go and do, like have children, have a normal life, you know, all the privileges I had as an able-bodied person. And it really took me aback, because I thought, that is exactly what it is. And then again, around this time in 2020, 2 of my closest friends had miscarriages, and both of them were talking to me and really struggling to process these emotions and process what happened. And they almost felt like, you know, from a medical perspective, it was kind of just brushed over, like, just try again, you know, it's fine. And even, you know, they hadn't even announced either of these pregnancies to the world. So people didn't even know. And I think for them, it was so difficult, because it was something nobody really knew about apart from close friends and family. And they were like, I can't just go and try again. I can't just let this go. I can't just, you know, let this be and feel fine about it, because what about the life that they were about to go down with that child? What about, you know, the plans they'd made? And obviously it's your body as well. And I think especially with the loss of a child, or the loss of anybody, it's so deeply impacting. But unless it's like that physical, obvious loss of like losing someone, you know, we don't understand living grief, or that it's even a concept. And I think, as you said, so many things in our society are so overlooked, and we're kind of just encouraged to move on, get over it. It's not a big deal. And actually, like you said, to everybody, it is so relative and can feel like the weight of a mountain, and nobody has that word for it. And the more I spoke about this and wrote about it in the book, the more people that came forward. And even a lady recently, which inspired the podcast I did, said, you know, that having the terminology of living grief brought her so much peace after years of not being able to have a healthy relationship with her daughter. And that was the feelings that she was feeling. And she said, even just hearing you say it brought me so much peace. And I think, you know, we all go through these things in life, whether it's a business that you thought you'd run your whole life and it would be incredibly successful and you've had to close it down, whether it's the loss of your dream career and you realize I can't do that. I've got to focus my energy on a loved one or something. You know, there's so many things every single person is grieving in this world. And that is the part of the healing journey, is allowing yourself to grieve what was, what could have been, and what if. And, you know, allowing yourself to find acceptance and peace with that.
I love it. For us, it was absolutely in the 2000, I mean, it hit America in 2008. You guys know, I'm sure, about the recession here, and we lost everything. We made it until 2010 that we finally had lost everything, and in 2011 had to move into a basement, family member's basement, and I was 7 months pregnant, and absolutely that happened. But I didn't until just now. Like, I have processed it. We have done work to process it, and obviously we're living a life because of the way that we were living. We're not living now type stuff. But yes, I didn't think about that as a living grief moment, but it was, because we were living a life that we thought, and it was taken away from us. Everything was taken away from us. And I mean, along with the pride of losing it and thinking we were doing everything right, but really we were doing everything wrong. And there's so much that goes to that, that if you don't do the work on that, yeah, I absolutely feel like it would keep you crippled to not moving forward. So in those moments, do you suggest, is that the same kind of thing as talking to yourself, your inner child, like talking when something like that is happening to you? Say you've lost this relationship, you've lost a friendship, you've had a miscarriage, anything, right? Any of these situations that happen, kind of start by talking to yourself, to your inner child, and saying, okay, you're okay. How can we make this better? I mean, like, where else would you go?
Yeah, I mean, I think talking is the most important thing, whether it's talking to a friend, talking to your partner. I think a lot of the time we don't want to talk about those things because we feel shame, or we feel like we shouldn't feel all these emotions towards it, because, you know, especially like with a miscarriage, for example, if you're only pregnant for like 1 or 2 weeks, like, it's not a huge amount of time, but that can be just as impactful at any stage of pregnancy, losing a child. So I think there's so many things we tell ourselves of like, I just need to get on with it, I don't need to talk about it, when actually talking about it is the very thing we need to do, whether that's with someone we trust, whether that's with ourselves. But for me, journaling is really powerful with that. And I think a lot of processing my living grief has been around journaling and just writing out every single emotion, you know, almost like a letter, or just even a word dump on a page. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be this perfect practice. It can be messy. It can be raw. So I think even just putting pen to paper and allowing whatever needs to come up to flow through you is a really good place to start. And, you know, those letters have been raw, messy, angry, sad, and, you know, the emotions come out as I do that because I'm allowing myself to acknowledge and process. You know, I'm allowing it to come up and come onto paper. And then afterwards I will burn that piece of paper or destroy it to really like energetically release it from myself. And you'd be surprised how powerful even that is. And I got my dad to do this a couple of years ago. He went through a divorce before he met my mum. And, you know, he's never really spoken about it. And when he has, it's kind of been like a negative kind of thing that he's always shared with us of how they broke up and what happened. And he found out that she had passed away through an obituary online. And, you know, I said, how are you feeling? And he said, I don't know, like, I feel like I shouldn't be sad because of what happened, but I do feel sad. And I said, just go and write a letter to her, because he'd never had a conversation with her in the physical after the things that had happened. So I said, well, you're never going to get that conversation with her. So why don't you just write a letter to her, get all those emotions out, put all those feelings on that piece of paper, and then burn it afterwards. And I didn't expect him to do it. He's like the least spiritual person ever. So I literally thought he was going to be like, yeah, whatever, Emma. But he did it. And he called me and he said, that was the most powerful thing I've ever done. I feel like I've lifted years of weight off my shoulders, and I feel like I have a peace that I never would have been able to have without doing that. So even just something as simple as that can honestly can relieve so much weight off your shoulders.
I had, so one of the gals that I'm thinking of in my head, she's gone through this experience in her life, and I had told her to do the same thing. I said, go and make like a whole ceremony of it, almost like, you know, say goodbye to the things that you were expecting. That's okay. This is exactly. So it's really, I'm loving that you had these same things that you were talking about, because I'm like, yes, I love that whole theory of saying goodbye to it. And this is no longer, it is something that you were expecting, but now you're saying goodbye, just like you would a person. Like if someone passes away, that's you need to say goodbye. There's that closure. Even in a relationship, when you break up, like you said with your dad, he didn't feel like he had that closure. There were things left unsaid that you didn't feel like you could possibly say to that person. So they're trapped inside you. And I love that. So freeing. I just thought of like 3 different letters I'm going to write while you were explaining that. So that's going to be my to-do list next. Okay. So let's jump into what I believe is my most favorite topic this year, is getting back personal power. I mean, this year, but since I started this community, honestly, because so many women, I feel like, are obviously generalities, but living in not their own dreams, living in because it's their husband's dream, because it's what their children want to do, because it's they're like a catalyst for other people's dreams. Like, I will help you achieve yours. I will help you achieve yours. And it's like, what about achieving our own? What about achieving what we want and desire? And that's not even necessarily, like I said, talking about money, talking about a career, talking about, yes, those are amazing things. But first of all, the foundation, I think the most basic is reclaiming your power in your mindset, in your self-love, in your finding peace and joy, and appreciating, like I said, the moments with the rubber duckies in the tub, instead of old me would have caused chaos to me. That's clutter that causes chaos to me, and it screams at me, right? And that's not peaceful. So let's dive into that. How can we help these women claim their own personal power? Step 1.
Yeah.
Step 1.
So what you touched upon at the beginning is perfect, because the year rate is 2024's energy and numerology. So the perfect time for this. The year rate in numerology represents the year of personal power, finances, money, and abundance. So it literally is the year of manifesting and abundance. So this is why I've literally gone so hard at the beginning of this year to say to people, like, do it this year. This is the time. We're not going to have this for another 9 years. So now is definitely the time to do so. And I think just naturally, as you said, you know, those themes are definitely coming up for people to kind of, like really bring it to the forefront, bring it to the focus. So I think definitely it's interesting that so many of us as women are givers, and we like always, you know, whether it's children, a partner, or a family member, or career, whatever, you know, we want to give, and that's beautiful, and that is an incredible energy in itself. But actually the divine feminine energy, and we both have divine masculine and divine feminine energy within us all, no matter how we identify, we step into that masculine of being the provider and the giver, and that serves us to some point. We have to have that balanced masculine energy there. But actually the divine feminine energy is around receiving. So actually it's ironic that a lot of us as women are the givers, and, you know, again, our partners can absolutely be the providers, but we all have those energies within us. But very often we neglect that receiving aspect. And again, like, especially with the manifestation journey, a big question I always ask at my talks is, how much do you allow yourself to receive? Because I can't even begin to tell you the blocks that women have around self-worth and receiving, which block their manifestations because they're not actively, practicing the art of receiving in all areas of their life, whether that's support, love, gifts, whatever. You know, there are so many instances, like even just allowing someone to hug you or whatever, like support you, you know, we feel like we have to be doing it all. And that is the unbalanced masculine energy, where we feel like we have to be doing it all. We need to make it happen, when actually we can also relax into that feminine energy of allowing ourselves to be held more, supported more by the universe, by the people around us. And I tell you what, when you work on your relationship with receiving, for me, it was around, I felt weird when I would receive gifts at like Christmas and birthdays. I don't know why, like I loved all the things people got me, but I just felt weird. And it was only when I started to unpack my relationship with receiving that I realized I was so far into that masculine energy of giving and making everybody's birthdays and Christmases so special. I'm a Virgo, so I love it, of, you know, always being like, oh, I really want them to enjoy this, that I didn't allow myself to receive that same energy. And I felt guilty or almost weird for receiving. And when I actually looked at that block and released that block, now I freaking love receiving gifts, and I don't feel guilty. I don't feel shame. I don't feel weird. So look at your energy and your relationship with receiving and challenge yourself this week to allow yourself to receive more, whether that's, you know, just asking your partner to help you around the house and just say, actually, I'm going to ask for help this week. I'm not just going to do it all myself and feel so frustrated afterwards. Or, you know, just asking for some support or whatever it is. If someone says to you, oh, I'll get your coffee this week, allow them to. Don't be like, oh no, don't be stupid, I'll get it. Just be like, thank you, that's amazing. So when you can allow yourself to receive more, that in itself is a powerful reclamation of your power, because you're allowing yourself to be in that balanced feminine energy of, it's okay for me to receive as well. And actually that will transform your abundance mindset so hugely as well. But again, I feel like boundaries and people pleasing, especially for me, have been one of the biggest lessons in my life so far. So again, looking at, you know, where are you giving your power away? A mantra that I love to repeat and share with people is something so simple that you can just say anytime that you feel frustrated about giving your power away, or you feel like you're not in control, or you feel like your boundaries have been kind of crossed, just say, I reclaim my power. That is it. I reclaim my power. I call back all the lost pieces of myself. Something so simple, but even just saying it, you just feel like, oh, I've got my power back. And you have the choice, 100%. We choose who we give our energy to. We choose what we give our focus to. So again, there may be some blocks and beliefs there that are maybe hindering you from fully seeing that, or fully being able to step into that energy of knowing like, no, I deserve better. I'm not going to tolerate that. I am going to take my power back. But listening to your intuition is another really big one as well. You know, what are you giving your power away to? When you're making decisions, does it feel good? Like you said earlier with that example, you know, you were saying yes to things when actually you really want to say no. Right. When you honor your no's, and for me this year, I'm actually learning to say no more. And I've always been like a yes person of like, say yes, you don't know what opportunities could come around. And that serves us to some degree. That's why there's a film and book called Yes Man. But ultimately, I'm actually learning to say no more, because then it's aligned for me. It's all about the alignment of everything. Like if it's a hell full body yes, of course I want to do it. But actually, I'm going to honor my no as well, because in that no, you create the space for the alignment and all the abundance that you want to come into your life. Because if you're cluttering your life with things that you don't really want to do, that are taking away your power, you come away frustrated. Is that allowing you to feel joy and expansiveness and abundance and get into the flow of receiving your desires? And you may think, how does saying yes to going on these pointless family things that just really irritate me and I don't need to do all the time, like I'm happy to do it once a month but not every week, you know, you might think, how does that impact my finances? When actually even just reclaiming your power can have such a huge shift in other areas of your life that you didn't even think possible.
Yeah, because you reclaim your power to saying no to spending. You reclaim your power to saying no to, like, because I totally get how they're related. That made complete sense to me. I love that. You're allowing yourself to say no to different things. It doesn't always have to be a person. You're saying no to food. If you're overeating, or if you have a not a nutritional diet, you're saying no to things, or it's taking back the responsibility of creating your own whatever. Like, what do you want to create? What do you want to, and we're going to get into this with manifesting just next. Oh my gosh, oh my heaven's sakes, you are so fun to talk to. Oh, I can't even, I've got a whole nother page of notes, but so I will try to jump into this, because it's all about claiming, well, this is how I want to get into this, is how to intentionally manifest and how to get clarity first on what your desires are. So that was, for me, when I started this women's community, the first thing I asked them to do is create your vision. And none of them could do it. None of them. Mm-hmm. Like, really, I mean, a lot of them, it was very much based on, I don't know how to create something that's just myself without my husband, without my kids, which I'm not asking them to create it without them. But you also have to have a vision of who you are as the woman without the husband, without the kids, you yourself, what do you envision for yourself? And then the other things will fall into place, right? Because you are your strongest, healthiest, happiest. So then your relationship with your husband will then fall into place at being the best because you are your best. Your kids will be best because you are your best. You know, it's that ripple effect. So that's what I want to get into next is the how-tos of aligning your authentic self so that you can manifest your desires, right? That's step 1 to step 2, I think.
Yeah, so I think, you know, the famous saying of, you know, like on airplanes when they say, you know, you need to put your own mask on first before you put anybody else's on. You know, you're going to be no good to your children if you've passed out. Like, you need to put your own mask on to be able to help and serve other people. So that analogy is so important because when you are filling your own cup and you're honoring yourself, you're honoring your desires, your dreams, your hobbies, whatever it is, your passions, you know, you are going to be able to show up as your best, most authentic self because you're going to have that cup full. And I know it's so easy for us to give and serve and, you know, have so many commitments around us that do, you know, prohibit us from, you know, being able to just sit there and have a full self-care and self-love day. But it's not about how much time you spend on it. It's all about the intentionality and creating the space for, you know, to honor yourself, to honor your dreams and visions. So if you're someone who really struggles to know what to manifest or what that vision looks like, then I always say, like, do a life wheel. A life wheel is a great tool and resource. And they're all in my books because they're so useful to like get a good picture of everything. You know, go through and rate each area of your life, see where it doesn't feel good, what would make that area a 10, and then you can start to say, right, well, if I want more fun and joy in my life, then that's what I need to put my attention to. Also, if you're someone like myself who wanted to manifest a relationship, I looked at what didn't work before and then flipped it. So everything I didn't like in that relationship, I flipped it into what I did want. And then it gave me good room and clarity to say, well, that's what I want then, because I know exactly what I don't want. So if there's anything in your life that maybe doesn't feel good or that, you know, is frustrating you, then there's the clues. Go to where it doesn't feel good and transform them into what can feel good. How do you want to improve that? How would that area then feel joyful and expansive and abundant to you? What is missing? What could you manifest? Or what would it take to make that area that 10? And in terms of alignment, yes, the first step in my alignment process is aligning with yourself first. So coming into that true authentic space within yourself. And I know a lot of women have said to me over the years, I don't know who the authentic version of myself is. Like, I actually don't know. And the inner work will definitely help you to uncover that as we, you know, unravel the identities, as we take off, you know, each layer. You will get into, you know, you will naturally feel into, okay. But the more you honor your boundaries, the more that you listen to your intuition, the more that you take back your power, the more that you love yourself and look after yourself, you know, with self-care and self-love and fill your own cup, naturally you will start to see that authentic version of yourself start to come through more. But it does change season to season, a bit like purpose. A lot of people think that we have one purpose in life, and it's just not true. Every season of our life will require a different version of ourselves and a different version of our purpose. So, you know, I think it's definitely important to look at who you are in this season of your life. You know, who I was 2 years ago is very different to who I am now because I went through a huge bit of inner work, a huge unraveling of something that I had no idea was there. So of course I'm not going to be the same person as I was even 2 years ago. So the authentic version of myself now, you know, these past versions of myself weren't inauthentic. You know, I wasn't purposely going around being inauthentic. Right. You know, it felt true to me at that point. So it's what feels true to you and listening to yourself, listening to that intuition, listening to that body. And again, honoring the season of your life that you're in. So yeah, you know, learning how to say no to the things that you really want to say no to and taking back that power is a big part of that alignment journey for sure.
That's so good. Well, I've said it so many times, but I'm looking at it right now. It's about marriage, but it says a successful marriage requires falling in love many times, always with the same person. And when I first got that 17 years ago, I thought that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. Obviously, like here I am, I'm like 25 and I'm like, That's so stupid. Obviously, you're falling in love with the same person. You're married to the same person. Oh, no. 17 years later, I can guarantee you I've had to fall in love with at least 4 different men. I for sure. And same he with me. I'm maybe more, maybe 8 different women. I don't know. But after, pretending to know how to be a wife after not even necessarily giving myself a chance to be a woman, and then pretending to know how to be a mother, it's these different, like you're saying, these seasons, and yeah, you're these different people, and all the while you're not trying to be authentic, but you kind of are faking it till you make it through life. Honestly, there's no rule book to how to be a wife, how to be, because people are so different. We're all so different. There's no rules. It's just like children. How do you raise this child? Well, I don't know. It worked with this one, but why won't it work with this one? So you have to, I think, absolutely, like you're saying, embrace the season you're in and appreciate that if you're pregnant this year and you are wanting it to be a certain way and love on your family and you're in this season, but you're at the same time kind of this inner struggle that's like, but I think I need to start a business. I really, really think I need to start a business. But now you've got this internal struggle that's like, I'm not saying you can't do both, but if you're feeling that internal struggle, it's like, what do you really want? Sit with that, get quiet with that, and identify what you really want. And that's why I love that you say intentionally manifesting. Intentional. Everything has to be intentional. You have to sit down, and that's what I mean. We came back to is being intentional. You said having these negative thoughts all the time isn't going to manifest them just because we have 80,000 thoughts all the time. But when you're intentionally manifesting that specific thing, that is going to be the law of attraction, because that is the thing that you're consistently, this is what I want, this is what I want, this is what I want. I love that you used the term romanticize your life. And I think that gives me because I love to read, right? I know a lot of women that love to read and escape into these great books, and not necessarily self-help. Right now, that's kind of me with self-help. I'm loving it. But these books that are just these stories, these maybe romances, and you kind of envision yourself as the heroine in these. And it's like, why can't you do that with your own life? Do that with your own life. Romanticize your own life. Romanticize the fact. And I actually love that you used making coffee, because I do that too. I've romanticized my routine of making coffee, because that is something that brings me peace and joy. Like, I love it. I've romanticized a cute outfit for the gym, because that makes me feel good and feel better about going to the gym. It's like romanticize this sexy, amazing, great communication relationship with your husband, and do it. Make it happen, instead of just sitting back and making up excuses of why you don't deserve it, or why you can't do it, or why everybody else in the world can do it but you. And I get pretty harsh when I talk about it, because I just have no room for excuses. I can't handle it. It's like, I see people that have so much less and create so much more, right? So why can't everyone? They can. So do it. So the romanticize your life, I love, and don't make excuses or be lazy. I'm show up in the way that you desire, right? Beautiful. I love it. You've been so fun to have on here. You are such a great conversation. And not to mention, I could just listen to your accent like all day long. So I would love for you to wrap me up with what is the most, this is going to put you in the hot seat here big time. Let's see if I can make it into a really good question. What is the most powerful thing that you have come to realization or come to terms with in yourself on your journey that you think radiates out of you to help others?
I hope it radiates out of me to help others.
Oh,
I mean, does. I bang on about it enough. So.
No.
So I hope it does. But from my point of view, something that has been such a huge lesson. And I think if anybody could say, you know, like what's one piece of advice that you would just give anybody of like how they could make manifestation work for them, is when you love yourself and you experience joy in your life, you don't need to worry about manifesting anything, because everything you want will fall into place and fall into your life when you love yourself unconditionally. So I feel like unconditional love is that key. And when, you know, you're in that energy and vibration, anything you want will be yours.
That's gorgeous. That's absolutely gorgeous. I couldn't have picked a better thought. So thank you for that. That's amazing. So where can everyone find you? What's the best platform, or what's the best site for everybody to come find all of your amazing books and all of your amazing workshops and all the things you have?
Yes, well, thank you. So you can find me on my social platforms. I'm pretty much on all of them, and my YouTube at I am Emma Mumford. And you can find me at emmamumford.co.uk, where you'll find all my books and everything that I've mentioned.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for joining me. And now you can get to your evening over there in the UK, and I'm going to get to my day.
Thank you so much for having me.
You bet.